Let me ask you a question that this entire debate has been avoiding. Why does this motion exist? Not what it proposes, why it exists. What problem it is actually trying to solve. Because if you listen carefully to proposition, underneath all the language about access and opportunity and human development, the real answer is this. The government does not have enough money, and the loan mechanism is a way to fund university access without the government paying for it. There is not an education policy, there is a budget strategy wearing the costume of one. And today, opposition is here to show you exactly what happens when the country gives student debts and calls it opportunity. First, proposition borrows Singapore solution but forgot to borrow Singapore condition. Proposition told you this works like Singapore. Income contingent repayment. You pay only after employment. Sounds reasonable. But here is what proposition speakers never address. Singapore has near full graduated employment. Their job market is small, tense, and tightly connected. A degree in Singapore reliably produces relevant employment. The chain works. Graduate, catch up, repay loan. Because the condition make each link in that chain whole. Now look at Indonesia. Every year, Indonesian graduates with degrees work jobs completely unrelated to their education. Not because they are incapable, because the job their degree prepared them for do not exist in sufficient numbers. In Indonesia, graduation does not reliably produce relevant employment. So what happens to the Indonesian students who takes a loan, graduates, and cannot find relevant work? They take whatever job is available to survive. That job does not pay enough to service the debt. The debt accumulates, the interest grow, the student loan that was supposed to be a bridge becomes a weight they carry for decades, and the bridge was never built. Same model, different conditions, completely different outcome. Proposition did not bring Singapore to Indonesia, they brought Singapore's surface while leaving Singapore's substance behind. 2. Proposition's own speaker said the US model is a failure, but they gave us no mechanism preventing Indonesia from becoming the US. At the very beginning of Proposition's speech, their speaker explicitly said the US student loan model is a failure, and that Indonesia should not replicate it. We agree, but then Proposition gave us no answer to the most important question in this debate. What makes Indonesia Singapore rather than the United States? Both countries have student loan mechanism. One works, one created a generation drowning in debt with no path to repayment. The difference is not the loan, the difference is everything surrounding the loan. The job market, the graduate employment rate, the economic conditions, the governance that ensures the promise of degree is actually kept. Proposition told you to avoid becoming the US, then propose a policy with no safeguard against exactly that outcome. There is not a solution, there is optimism with a price tag. So first, here's my argument. Indonesian constitution call education is a human right. A loan is not a right, it is a transaction. There is not a legal argument, it is a philosophical one. When a nation writes into its founding document that education is human right, it is making a promise. The promise is that we, the state, we will ensure our people can access this, not we will help our people borrow access to this with interest. Think about what a loan actually says to a student. It says you have the right to education, but you will spend the next decade paying for exercise of that right. You have the right, but it will cost you. You have the right, but the state is not giving it to you. The state is selling it to you on a credit. That is not a right. It is a layaway plan for a constitutional guarantee. Indonesia already has mechanisms that come closer to fulfilling that promise. There's tuition systems, need-based aids for those who truly cannot pay. These are imperfect and insufficient, but they at least attempt to honor the philosophical commitment. A loan mechanism does not move Indonesia toward that commitment, it moves Indonesia away from it. The moment the state decides that constitutional rights must be financed by the people who hold them, it has not expanded access to those rights, it has monetized them, and the government that monetizes constitutional rights is not developing its own people, it is profiting from them. Second, debt doesn't just change what students owe, it changes what an entire generation believes education is for. Look at what happens when a generation of students enters university carrying debt. The debt creates an obligation. The obligation demands repayment. The repayment demands income. The income demands employment. And because the debt is real and immediate, the employment demanded is not the work they love, not the work they were built for, not the work Indonesia needs most. It is the highest paying employment available. Every debt-burdened graduate simultaneously follows the same narrow corridor of injustice. The one that pays enough to service a loan. Most don't get through. The one who do chose the work because of debt, not because of calling. Think about the teachers. Indonesia does not need more people who became teachers because there is nothing else available. Indonesia needs teachers who wake up every morning genuinely wanting to be in a classroom, who chose teaching because it is what they were made for. But a debt-burdened graduate cannot afford to teach. Teaching does not pay enough to service a significant loan. So that person, the one who would have been extraordinary, who would have changed hundreds of children's lives, look at the debt and walks into a corporate building instead. Then Indonesia loses a great teacher. It gains an unhappy counting down the years until the loan is paid. Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of graduates, making the same calculation every single year. There is not human resource development, there is human resource distortion, and it does not reverse itself when the loan is paid, because by then, the habit of choosing work by its price tag is already formed, already taught to the next generation, and already the culture. Third, the loan model builds a trap that makes genuine reform impossible later. Here's the consequence nobody is talking about. Not what loans do to students today, what loans do to Indonesia's ability to fix education tomorrow. Once Indonesia builds its university system around loan-funded tuition as the primary revenue source, once the government becomes dependent on loan repayment as its education funding mechanism, the entire architecture requires students to keep borrowing it for it to survive. Universities needs the tuition, government needs the repayments, private lender needs the interest. Every part of the system becomes financially dependent on the debt continuing. And then one generation from now, when Indonesia look at its graduate and sees exactly what we predicted, people in debt, choosing wrong careers, teaching not happening, doctors not going to remote areas, engineers not innovating, when Indonesia finally wants to honor its constitutional promise and make education genuinely accessible, it will find that the system it built to solve the problem has become the biggest obstacle to solving it. The US cannot really easily remove its student loan system because the loans are good policy. Proposition's own speaker told you they are a failure. The US cannot remove it because universities, government agency, and lenders are all financially dependent on loans continuing. The trap is built, the door is locked from the inside. Indonesia would be building the same trap voluntarily, knowingly, after watching the US build it first and fail. Germany made a different choice, and that choice is still available to Indonesia. Germany faced the same question Indonesia is facing right now. Universities cost money, students cannot all afford pay. Government has a limited budget. What do you do? Germany answered with a different question. Not how do students finance their education, but how does a nation invest in its people. Germany chose to fund universities directly through tax revenue, treating education not as a service students purchase, but as a public good the nation provides. Germany graduates do not enter the workforce asking how they pack what they borrow. They enter asking what they want to build. The difference between debt and investment, between transaction and gift, produces a completely different kind of graduate and a completely different kind of nation. And Germany is not Indonesia, we know that. But Germany proves something that cannot be argued away. The choice proposition is presenting as the only option is not the only option. Another way exists. Countries have chosen it and it works. Our solution, opposition does not say do nothing. We say do it in the right order before the trap is built while the door is still open. A government serious about education as a constitutional right prioritizes it as its budget as a first obligation, not as a last resource. It's strengthening existing need-based aid to reach the middle-income families currently failing through the gap. It invests in university quality directly. It builds the job market condition where degree produces genuine opportunity, so that when a graduate finishes, what waits on the other end actually keeps the promise the degree made. Fix the condition first, build the foundation, make the right choice before the wrong one becomes permanent. Because Indonesian scholars who study abroad on full funding and do not return, they are not living because there is no bond. They are living because Indonesia has not yet built the condition that make returning worth it. A loan with a bond does not fix that. It trusts the one who stays and confirms for the ones who live that they were right to go. The answer is not to trap people into staying. The answer is to build something worth staying for. Honorable judges, why does this motion exist? Because the government needs money, and the easiest way to fund education without paying for it is to make students pay it for later. Indonesia's constitution promise is that that education belongs to them, not as a product, not as a loan, as a right. So opposition stands to keep that promise, and we strongly oppose.